Norio Kushi from Asheville, North Carolina, is said to be an awakened being. This is a first for Souljourns. We've interviewed self-awakened individuals before, but never in our 22-year history has anyone other than Norio ever accepted our invitation to explain in detail how their awakening occurred. Norio first became aware that life as he knew it was not real when he began to understand that his thinking, his thoughts, were not real either.
For the first time, the thinking was no longer occurring in my head. I could see thinking. I was outside of my thoughts. The thinking would still arise, but it was I could watch it as as though I was watching a movie.
Noriel suddenly knew how to detach himself completely from his thoughts. But what came next, through self-inquiry, was even more profound.
All of a sudden, I could see that everything was energy, not just thoughts, and and then a few minutes later, once there was a scene of that, I realized, oh, I don't exist.
Wow.
And that's what I call the cosmic joke.
The joke, he says, was as powerful as being hit by a cosmic 2x4. He came to the realization that life for him was never going to turn out as planned.
All I got was that everything that I was living for was not going to happen. So it wasn't discouraging at all. It was just saw that as a fact. There was no desire, I didn't all of a sudden think I was a failure. The whole idea of success and failure actually completely evaporated with seeing that. There was no more success, no more failure. There was only the moment.
This experience of self-transformation in Norio is personal, yet his wish is for it to be shared with others, so that they might also come to see who they are and who they are not.
Because we're caught up in this separate self-identity, that's the human dilemma, as I had shared with you, that we don't know what we are and we don't know that we don't know. And so none of us, once caught up in this, we don't recognize our core divinity.
A gentle person for whom laughter comes easily, Noriel's lifelong passion has always involved any vehicle with wheels. So it's no surprise that today he is a cross-country driver of an 18-wheeler, spending countless hours behind the wheel, crisscrossing America, content with self-discovery. Welcome to Souljourns. What Norio talks about here is not easy for some to grasp. Mystical writers, sages, and students of spiritual awakening call it by different names. Noriel's belief is this is attainable by all.
There's a wisdom that comes through the body, which is much more primary than the intellect. Everything I thought I was just that, just in my mind. It was not real. Once I saw it, I said, "Oh my God, I have to share this," because I saw that the illusion, that identifying with something which is not real, was the source of all of humanity's suffering.
Noriel, first thing I want to say is welcome to Souljourns. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today. Jody and I have done our homework. Every time we find out something new about you, we just relish the idea of having a talk to you in person. And after, I think I saw, at least we've seen 3 video interviews or presentations by you on YouTube. We're looking to add even more questions to some of the experiences you've had right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Jody to kick us off with an invitation.
Well, I just want to say, Norio, we were both very attracted in the interviews we watched of you. We were very attracted to your apparent carefreeness and lack of ego, complete lack of ego, and your laughter.
Yeah, your laughter is infectious.
And we decided, this guy, we want to get what this guy's got.
Yeah.
So. Well, the lack of ego, I put on a good show.
I think the whole world could use what you have in one quantity, and that's just lots of laughter, chuckling, and humor and lightheartedness. You have it in spades.
Well, if you look at the way the world is, you have to say, God has a sense of humor. So, so it's like, so it's obvious. Yeah,
What we've developed a lot of questions because we're now bona fide fans, and we hope that maybe you'll tell your story, um, uh, leaving time for questions in the end because we both have,
sure.
and our friends contributed questions as well.
I love telling stories, of course. When I'm asked to just tell a story, then I'm kind of not sure where to begin, because we ultimately, everything that we're looking for, we already have, and we always have had, and always will have. And so the story about it, we just have to look at our own life, and that's the story about it. And then I have my stories too, and as to how it was recognized. But it's so I'm not sure exactly where to begin. I I
I
mean,
always like it when you start with your mother when you were 5. I think that's where the story began.
she definitely was the biggest influence in my life, and shaped the way in which I navigate in my life. And there's Steve Earle in the book that he had written, Awake at the Wheel, about my story. It clearly points that out. It's the way in which we're typically. Uh, I find now that most people are raised or in conditioned or uh, to navigate their life is through their intellect, through and my mother, she told me when I was very young that our feeling is what is the guide through our life, and not the intellect. The intellect is secondary, but the feeling is the primary way of navigating life. And even at a young age, I knew what she was talking about, because that's the way she lived. There's a wisdom that comes through the body, which is much more primary than the intellect, and so that's. And unfortunately, many of us are taught to disregard that, to not trust our feelings, and it's the other way around. Our feelings is something that we can trust absolutely. And when I say feelings, because we don't learn to trust it, we don't know the distinction between feeling and emotion. And but I knew as a young child what the difference was. I didn't know intellectually. I just knew because there's a distinction in the feeling in the body. So the feeling is something which is felt with the entire body. There's a sense of openness, and there's a feeling that arises, waves of feeling, um, and that feeling is translated into images and thoughts by the mind, and then the emotions are thoughts and images in the mind, which are then interpreted by the body, and that's more of a restrictive sensation. It's felt localized in different parts of the body. So there's a distinction between emotions and feelings in that way. It served me well, and of course I got caught up in the uh, the story of life and the struggles, uh, and one thing was never interested in spirituality, what people consider spirituality, and so my the focus as I grew up and I got caught up in the story of my life and success and chasing success and running away from failure. I was well into that, and using the feelings, did quite well. I enjoyed my life, and I would, anything I went for, I generally was able to achieve. Just following my feelings, and so. But at one point, when I was 35, I was living in Vermont. I had been married for a few years, and I told my wife, when we got married in '89, that okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go to Vermont, and let's move to Vermont, and I'm going to start a bus company and all that. And I didn't have the money for any of that, but that's exactly what happened after just just through series of what people would call coincidences or synchronicities. It all came together. And I remember feeling proud of myself and sitting in being in standing in the living room and congratulating myself. And as I'm standing there, all of a sudden there's a pause, and there's a feeling came through my body that said, "It's all BS." And then immediately my mind, no, 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 I'm winning at this game. It's not BS.
That just came out of the blue, huh?
Yeah, just out of the blue. And then so then of course, I completely, I didn't want to hear that, just completely pushed that away. And then a number of years later, through, I want to get into the whole story, but all that fell apart, and I found myself in Asheville, North Carolina, which was, and we had moved to Asheville, North Carolina in the year 2000 or 1999. Bought a house in 2000, and everything I was chasing fell apart. In August, I had lost my job, and I was wondering what I was going to do next. I had sent out resumes, and then I had gone and I had just come back from an interview in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I'm standing in the kitchen and I'm talking to my now ex-wife. We had split up, but we're still living together. And I'm standing in the kitchen. I told her how the interview went, and then there was here again a momentary pause in the feeling as I'm looking out the kitchen window, looking out at the trees, and this feeling shows up, and this time the feeling as it moved into the mind, they said, "Life is not going to turn out." so, so when, and the thing about these feelings, I mean, once I saw that, I knew that it was absolute truth, bottom line fact.
Had you already had plans for how life in your mind was going to turn out?
Well, I didn't have a clear image, but I was chasing success. I wanted to be a multimillionaire, and I had all these ideas of what life was going to look like, and one day I was going to arrive at that.
So how much of a bummer was it for you to realize that wasn't part of the plans to turn out in your life?
The thing is, that insight that life is not going to turn out, it's just, to me, anytime these feelings come up, and I know, and it speaks to me, so to speak. I know, I never question it. I see it as, it's just a knowing. And so I saw that, and then the remarkable thing about it is that just prior to that, I was struggling and wondering what I was going to do next, wondering which way to go, etc. And the moment I saw that, once I saw that as I'm looking out the kitchen window, and I got the message, life is not going to turn out. There's a sensation of 40 pounds of weight lifted off my shoulder. So when I tell that story, it seems like it's negative, but it didn't feel at all negative to me, because there was an immediate sensation of 40 pounds of weight being lifted off my shoulder. And then there was this clarity there of, I knew immediately what I was going to do next. It was like the moment before that, I was struggling, wondering what I'm going to do. And that insight, since then, I have not ever had to make a decision. What I see now is that in every moment, and this is true for all of us, in every moment, the next step is there. It's always present in every moment.
Whether you think about it or not, it comes.
Right. It's there. It's as the life is unfolding, in every moment, the next step is there. And we don't have to think about it. And I realize that the reason we struggle with our having to make a decision is because our attention is on an idea of a future. We're conditioned to live for a future. You know, since we're a child, okay, what are you going to be when you grow up? You know, I remember sitting when I was 13 with a guidance counselor, picking my subjects for high school when I was living in Brookline when I was 13. And she's sitting there, she's asking me, what am I going to do when I grow up? And, you know, I have to pick these subjects based on what I'm going to be doing in the future. So we're conditioned to constantly be chasing a carrot, and which alternatively means that you want to avoid failure. You know, you got to make something of your life. You know, you got to do something productive. And so that way of living, which is being caught up in our thinking, because it turns out our future is just an imagination. It's not an actuality. There is actually that future is an imagination. And so our way of thinking is based on somehow getting to this imaginary future. And so therefore, every moment is edited and from this idea that there's this imaginary place we have to get to.
Does that mean you shouldn't have goals? You shouldn't have plans of any kind?
Oh no, that's no. We're still going to make goals and we're still going to make plans. Otherwise, we couldn't get here to get together and have this conversation. It's part of living to make plans and goals, but it has nothing to do with success or failure. It has not. It's just about. There's no agenda. There's no ultimate reward or anything. I'm not going to be a better person or a worse person for enjoying our time together. So it's so plain being human, we make plans and goals, etc. But the idea that I'm going to become something better in the future, that's all imagination. And so seeing that life was not going to turn out, that way of living for a future just fell away. So I stopped pursuing I didn't even know it, but the idea of chasing a success just ended at that moment. And living for a future ended at that moment. And the moment that ended, we don't recognize that takes a lot of energy. There's a lot of attention and living for some future goal. And so with that ending, then what the next step, how life is unfolding, the next step is right there in front of our nose. So immediately I knew, okay, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to go back to driving a truck, which is something I love to do. And once living from that place, and because I was no longer chasing a future, the way in which the life was being viewed shifted. Before I was looking and seeing, okay, how's this going to get me to where I want to go, et cetera. And it's all, it's all made up, and it's just imagination. It's not the actual. So once that way of interacting with life unfolding based on some imaginary future, and instead just watching life unfolding um, is what occurred. Then I started seeing things which was always there, but I never saw before. And one of the first things, once I got through all the returning to driving a truck and everything, which took a little while, and as I'm driving, I'm contemplating, thinking about the problems in my life, problems with relationships, problem with finances, things that I had struggled with before. And then all of a sudden, I saw clearly, wait a minute, I'm not the only one with problems. So I said, it struck me, and it's so simple and obvious that, wait a minute, everyone has problems. We all have problems. And so I thought, oh, well, maybe it's not a problem having a problem. Maybe being human is part of it's a package deal, being human. Problems come with being human, okay? And so if it's a package deal, then it's not a problem to have problems. So, so right, it was like, yeah, so I thought, oh, that's curious. It's like my entire adult life, it completely escaped. I was so self-absorbed in my own problems, that it didn't occur to me that everyone has problems. So anyway, so once 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 that was seen, then I thought, oh, okay, what else have I missed? What else have I? What else, which is so obvious, have I missed? And so the question came up: what does it mean to be human? And that question became the underlying way in which I looked at the world as it unfolded. And so in asking that question, I began to get all kinds of insights in what we are as humans. And it was done deliberately. It was a deliberate question, but it was done in a lighthearted way. It was done like I felt like I was a little kid playing in a sandbox. And here this sandbox is the question: what does it mean to be human? And so I'm playing, and so and I called up my best, a really good friend, close friend, and I told him about, hey, I'm playing, I'm asking the question. This is my new game. I told him my new personal project is asking what does it mean to be human. And I described it to him. I said, what I'm doing is I'm studying, asking the question and studying humanity in the same way entomologists would study would see a new species of butterfly and would be curious, oh, what is this? And the entomologist would just watch it in its environment and its behavior, and I described him, well, like if the butterfly behaves in a particular way, the entomologist isn't going to say, no, you're not supposed to behave that way. No, you're a bad butterfly. No, you're not behaving wrong or something. He's just going to observe and be curious of its behavior. So I'd explained this and described this to my friend, that this is what I was doing now. I'm studying humans in this way, like a new species, and and I told him, and I'm the specimen that I'm going to be studying. So I kind of so I took a back seat, kind of a back seat, and just watched myself and watched the way I interacted with other people, and watched the thoughts which would arise, and just observed. This is studying me as a specimen of humanity. So and in that way, it's kind of a game, more like a lighthearted game, and I saw all these insights started coming in, and like time, I could discovered, or I could see, was created in the mind, for example. It's I saw that it was something that it was an interpretation and not an actuality, and just these different things start showing up. And in the same way I talked about the feelings, the insights would be coming in through the body and the feelings, and uh and then and then eventually, over many months of playing in this sandbox as I'm driving my truck and doing that, I was able to I I was able to see what thinking was, and and um and this was in February of 2005. I just one day, um well, the night before that, this I could see what thinking was. I was able to see that beliefs. I was able to see what beliefs are in thinking. And I saw that beliefs are an attachment to an idea. And so I saw that, oh, okay. So whether if I believe in God or if I believe there's no God, both of them are attachments to an idea. Neither of them are, one is no better than the other. And not one is no more factual than the other fact. They're both just attachments to ideas. And I laughed. I thought that was really funny to see that.
Yeah.
And then the next day, for the first time, the thinking was no longer occurring in my head. I could see thinking. I was outside of my thoughts. The thinking would still arise, but it was I could watch it as as though I was watching a movie.
Mm.
Yeah. So these are all. I mean, there I had many insights, like the one I mentioned about time prior to this, and so, and the thing is, once there's that uh, ability to observe the thoughts, then I saw that thoughts are energy, which pass through the body and then through the mind, and uh, and I could observe all of that, and I could see that every thought, it rises and falls like the waves of an ocean. So I'm driving my truck. I'm just watching these waves of thoughts. I felt like really relaxed, like I was sitting on a beach watching these waves of thoughts coming and going. and and the ocean is this sea of silence. So just grooving, having a good time, driving, and and so I could. It's I just followed the thoughts into the ocean, and as I did so, I could be in this silence, and and then another thought would come, and so I was playing in this this ocean, and I could rest in the ocean for hours at a time of silence with no thoughts and stuff. So anyway, so after 4 days of playing in this way, as I said, I see that the waves were is energy. All of a sudden, I could see that everything was energy, not just thoughts, and and then a few minutes later, once there was a scene of that, I realized, oh, I don't exist.
Wow.
And that's what I call the cosmic joke.
We're going to be returning to part one of Noriel's interview with Souljourns in just a few minutes. But first, some additional details of Noriel's epiphanies, as he calls them. Editor's note. Describing the experiences Norio and others have gone through in expanding their awareness is made challenging by a vocabulary problem. Those who have become enlightened, aware, present, awakened, living in the presence, or who have found moksha, an Eastern term for emancipation or liberation, often use different terms or no terms at all to describe their various experiences. Norio talks about this in the book written about him called Awake at the Wheel. He says there is no such thing as awakening or enlightenment as conceived by the mind. I have no idea, he says, if I'm awake or enlightened, two terms he has never owned, and for a good reason. For one thing, they smell of elitism, he has said. They imply that there are those who are awake or enlightened, and those who are not, and that those who are exceptional. He says the awakened ones belong to an order of avatars chosen to play a special role in the evolution of humanity. Having transcended the mundane, they are to serve from seats in a higher dimension as our guides. However, a person like Norio might best be described by pointing to his own words. Norio is one who now uses the following descriptive terms to help better identify his own personal experiences of growth. He refers to the spacious, formless mental void, an awareness, boundless, and infinite intelligent energy, suffused with a presence defying all description. He talks about the essence of unconditional love, embracing all, pure and unbridled potential. He refers to a place that's timeless and permanent, perfect and complete, shared equally by all, and with a sense of sameness with the rest of humanity. And in regards to the plight of others or the future of the planet, Norio says, when the bubble in which the separate self resides is burst, the individual thrust laid bare feels the pain of humanity more acutely than ever. News of a friend's death, for example, or refugees adrift at sea, cause the individual to feel agony. Where it can, it speaks out on these issues. The difference is, it also isn't invested in these matters. It isn't attached to outcomes. It acts selflessly, that is, in the absence of self. The world, with all of its pain, is what Norio calls ever already the great perfection. The world, he says, can never be incomplete, but it can become more complete. There are no wrongs to be righted, just rights to be made more right. And the only way to realize more completeness and rightness in the world, Norio says, is to come from a space of equanimity and absolute completion. Our interview with Norio resumes now. We pick up with where we left off. He was talking about a new revelation of great significance in his life. It was the day he said, I don't exist. You expressed that just now on a rather low-key, nonchalant basis. Oh, I don't exist. I'm guessing at the time that happened, your response was maybe heart thumping?
No, not at all. To be clear, obviously there's existence. There is an existence, but everything that I thought I saw it was not real. I saw that it was just an idea. And, so I saw the image of me and the memories and history of who I am that I said was me. I saw never was there. It was never real. So I saw it was like I thought of I saw my life as like a bad opera. And so I so I thought of the Phantom of the Opera. So the Phantom of the Opera is there inside my mind. So I saw the me. Everything I thought I was just that, just in my mind. It was not real. And so that was the cosmic joke, and it was. And the moment once I saw it, I said, "Oh my God, I have to share this," because I saw that the illusion, that identifying with something which is not real, was the source of all of humanity's suffering and all humanity's problems. So, because we're going around managing this image and this story of who and believing that's who we are, and and that this person is not real. It's just an idea in thinking.
So,
Yeah. So and then the next thought is, how is it's so blatantly obvious. It was like in the same way I said, how did I miss that I'm not the only one with problems? In the same way, it's like it's so obvious. How could I ever miss that this is not, it's only idea, it's not real. It's not it's not a fact. It's not an actual identity. And so subsequently, as I'm playing in the ocean of silence and for the next 10 days or so, the insights of how this all happens just came in. And it's seen that it's actually not negative or not a bad thing, that we forget that's part of the um, part of the design of being here on the planet is the forgetting is an aspect of that, and it's and all basically it's the universe having a good time, and it's the sense of humor of the universe.
Norio, I notice that you don't use any jargon when it comes to sharing your story about this great transformation in your life. Somebody might call it your self-awakening or self-realization or moksha if you were from India. Um,
Uh-huh.
how do you refer to this enormous transition in your life?
Well, the cosmic joke is that that's always what it's been, and was never not that. And so therefore, the joke is that it's a transformation, but it's not at the same time. It's the paradox, because it never was there in the first place. So so and at the same time, it's something that, oh my God, I thought I have to share this with anyone who, friends or family. And the thing is that, as I had mentioned, I was never interested in spirituality. I was aware of things called spirituality, meditation, things, but I was never interested in any of that. So, so as I went to share this, then all of a sudden I discovered there's a whole group of people that was looking for something, that for me was never on my radar. So,
I have an obvious question that I wanted to ask about that very point there. So many people we know, the subject is not new to us. Are we there yet? No. But we're very much interested in the journey, and so many people we know are on that same journey. And they do have, unlike you, a spiritual background, a religious background, years, if not decades of practice towards their own transformation, self-awakening, call it what you will.
uh-huh.
Why you? You didn't even have an intention about this, if I read it correctly, let alone a religious or spiritual background. Why Norio?
well, what was seen is that the infinite, or God, in playing, there's what I call the underlying operating way it manifests is through what I call the evolutionary principle. So one of the things that I used to title my talks when I first started talking about this is the next evolution. And the way it plays is that it's the way everything is unfolding is it's always looking to complete itself and evolve step by step. And so so everything in everything is designed is just automatically doing that in its design when we follow our design. So the what occurs is that once as a child, like, I learned how, it was given, the insights showed up how all of this occurs and how we adopt this separate self-identity through languaging, and that how the infinite manifests through different steps. Um, First in vibration, from the infinite to vibration, to light, and then to this uh, the world of silence. Well, it's not silence. It's I call it silence because it's an absent. It's beyond thought. Beyond thought, and then into the material world. Um, Light and vibration create the material world, and then that uh, and it's all, well, it's all energy, and all energy is also consciousness. It's infinite consciousness energy as well. And um, so it's all occurring through languaging, and so the, the vibration of languaging and the language and so as a small child, once we begin to speak, once we begin to language, we adopt this separate self-identity, which which so it's not something that we're born with. The separate self-identity, it's something that we learn when we're a toddler, when we begin to speak. So, but unknowns to any of us, the separate self-identity is only an idea. It's only a concept. It only exists in the different layers. It's not an actuality. But the human being is all of that, from the infinite to the physical. You know, that's all. That's what we are. Is all of that. But the idea is only exists as a fragment in the outer layer of thinking. Nothing wrong with thinking or the conceptual layer of our being, but the me is only exists there, and so we lose touch with all of that, the rest of our being, and that being a fragment of thought is always going to be incomplete, and it's never going to. So there's always going to be, once we adopt that as who we are, there's always going to be a sense of something missing, because it's not just a whole complete thought in and of itself. It's a fragment of a thought, and so therefore, um, so there's a so the seeking is the natural evolutionary impulse of the infinite attempting to complete itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the urge, that seeking urge, is there, being that energy, evolutionary impulse, energy of seeking. Or for me, in my case, it was success. I was chasing success because I didn't feel complete. I felt like success was going to make me whole and complete. Um, that's the seeking is what it drives. That evolutionary impulse is then filtered through this me identity, which is a fragment in thinking, and so that's the seeking that shows up. For people who are focused on spirituality, it's called seeking. For someone like myself who wasn't focused on spirituality, it's called, chasing success or whatever, So, but the underlying drive is that there's this desire for completion, being whole and complete. So regardless of whether it's seeking, looking for material success, or looking for what we would consider spiritual goals, it's the same evolutionary impulse that's being manifested through the separate self-identity. And the cosmic joke is that the separate self-identity, being a fragment in thinking, can only exist as a fragment. It can never be complete. So once that's seen, then it's seen that, oh, wait a minute, we're already complete.
Norio, Ted's question was why you? And are you saying that when you reach the moment of saying life isn't going to turn out as you wanted or expected, your seeking in the world was over?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And that must have been a very deep realization. And maybe We all need to reach that moment. Either obtain it all and realize it doesn't cut it,
Yeah.
or give up.
Yeah. And I think for many people, my understanding is that there are people who finally give up, even on the spiritual path.
Mhm.
And once it's given up, then they see what was seen through for me as well. The way in which we are thinking, and meaning in the way in which there's life unfolding, and the thinking and concepts are, like I said, nothing wrong with them. They're a necessary part of being human. But it's been the way in which we're thinking. We're interpreting what's unfolding from the perspective of something missing, and that there's something out there I have to get to complete myself. I need to find. So, which is, in a sense, to put it in a way, that whole way of thinking or living is a lie, because it's based on the idea that that I'm a fragment, which the me identity is a fragment of thought, but that's not what we are. That's the that, but we don't know that. As a toddler, we adopt that identity, as our parents talking to us. When we first start learn to speak, first we carry this identity around like it's like a stuffed animal. Say, oh, Norio is hungry, or something, and then eventually it becomes absorbed into the child itself, and then now the child itself is identified with an idea, which is just a fragment in thinking, and that becomes the basket in which it's now got to become whole and complete. And so then we spend the rest of our life attempting to fill this basket to eventually be whole and complete. And as we know, this basket it's never whole and complete. And so
When you reach the realization that it's not going to turn out, life isn't going to turn out, did you get a sense of completion there?
no. All I got was that everything that I was living for was not going to happen. So it wasn't discouraging at all. It was just, just saw that as a fact. So there, in that, there was no desire. I didn't all of a sudden think I was a failure. The whole idea of success and failure actually completely evaporated with seeing that. There was no more success, no more failure. There was only the moment.
I think that's key, because
So
some people would develop new goals, some people would despair.
yeah.
Other people develop what's called Encore Anxiety. I got to maintain. You were different. It sounds like the answer to why you was in that moment and what you got out of that.
Well, number one, the other thing about these feelings as they arise if it's felt through the whole body, and then it moves up into the cognitive, the conceptual layer of our being, and it's completely void of judging. It's not good, neither good nor bad, right or wrong, and it's just like a factual thought. It's just, oh, that's the way it is, period. And so it wasn't followed by immediate thought, oh, I'm a failure because I'm not going to get anything. It was just seeing that, oh, this is factual, that I'm not going to get everything I was striving for. And so my predicament at the time was, I have a mortgage, I have, 6 kids, I need, I've got all these things that I need to, that I'm responsible for. And so the struggle that was occurring just prior to seeing that was focused on how am I going to support the family. And so then when I saw that, oh, life is not going to turn out, then immediately, because I stopped, we don't recognize we're living. We don't recognize that 90% of how we're living, 90% of what we think is real is not real. It's all based on this imaginary idea of a me that's incomplete, that has to be complete. And so based on that whole way of thinking, 90% of the way in which we're interpreting what's arising is not true. It's, not bad, it's not right or wrong, but it's, and so, and I see that if we're faced with having to make a decision and not knowing what the next step is going to be, like I was struggling before I saw this, it's all based on that, because we're of the way in which we're identifying with this fragmented me and living and thinking that there's some imaginary future where it's going to be whole, and that whole idea, it turns out is the way we've been raised. We have no choice but to think in that way, because our parents think in that way, our grandparents, everyone else in society is thinking that way. But it turns out that living in this way is the source of all the turmoil with humanity on the planet. And so that's the moment that way of thinking ended. And so therefore, I didn't then all of a sudden feel whole and complete. All I saw was that, oh, the next step is obvious. And I saw, because it was no longer focusing on some imaginary future. In every moment, I saw that next step is right there in every moment.
You mentioned your kids, half a dozen kids. How have they learned to react to the new Norio, and the same with your friends and coworkers when you meet at a lunch stop with other truck drivers? How do they express the puzzlement that we must all have when we meet somebody like you?
Well, I mean, I love my kids, and we all love each other, of course, and they definitely saw a change. My daughter used to call me TNT, which
I heard
stands for
that.
tense and tight. At one point, I was many years later, I remember something showed up, and to me, if I get upset or angry, whatever, if that happens, so what? It's not a big deal. It comes and goes. So, I think I've been angry a half a dozen times since then, but, or, not that I shouldn't say anger has shown up, and then I see it. There's no resistance to it. Like, it's like, oh, that's interesting. And then
Does it surprise you when it shows up?
no, not at all. I just see it for whatever shows up doesn't surprise me. It just shows up, and it's like, okay, it's a more a curiosity.
You mentioned a couple of times something that I think is very important in your life from the way I hear it, that your intention now, maybe it's your big desire, if you're allowed to have that, looking towards the future, is to share what you have now with others, to share it, as you say.
Yeah.
How's that going, and how many people get it without saying, Norio, you've confused me more about who I am?
Right. That's what I tell people. I'm here to confuse you. Create mischief. What 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 is intended to be shared is not something I have, which you don't have.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. Um, it's something we already are. We already, and I mean, every single person is that. Every single person is already whole and complete, and every single person is an expression of the infinite. It's and we don't know that, but we already are. So it's just the layers of, this is who I am. I need to get this, and I need to do this. That is being held on to, which takes energy to hold on to this self-identity, and hold on to life being a struggle, and all of that is occurring on top of that we're already whole and complete. So it's so everything I want to share is not something we don't already know. That we all know that, but it's just forgotten. So I'm here just to as a prodding reminder.
Norio, when thought stopped, and then you came to the point where you knew that you're not who you thought you were, or you don't, the person you thought you were doesn't exist.
Right.
What were you then? What are we?
Well, the joke is that we're nothing.
We all laugh uproariously.
We're everything and nothing. What I now see in the spiritual world, now that I've been introduced to our spiritual play world, is that we're attempting to replace me with another me. Okay, this me is one of suffering, or one not. There's problems with this me. I need to be a bigger me or a different me. So and what's not recognized is that the whole idea of a me only exists in the outer layer of our being. It's an identifying, labeling, and it's an identifying with a label, and all labels only is only an interpretation of everything that's arising, which is nothing wrong with that. That's the way we play as humans. It's the mischief happens when we then take one of the labels of what's arising, and then identifying with that and saying, "Oh, that's who I am." So in seeing all of this, the whole world of identifying with anything ends. So there's no longer identifying with anything.
So there's no history there. There's no toxicity there. There's no unrealistic joy or happiness there.
Well, what is?
Well, my friend who I told you about, my friend, when I came up with the question, what does it mean to be human? I called him up and told him about it. He's an astrologer, although he doesn't do that for a living. He's a contractor, excellent contractor, and but his hobby, or something he loves, his passion is astrology, human design, all that. So incredibly intuitive. So a year prior to me getting the cosmic joke, we talk regularly, and I said, hey, you haven't given me a reading in quite a while, since 1975 when we first met. Hey, how about another? He said, okay. So he gave me a reading a year before, and he said, and he said, I pulled out, we set a time. I stopped at a truck stop, and we were on the phone. And says, oh, I've forgotten how interesting your chart was. And he said, you're going to be giving talks. And I said, oh, I am. What about? He said, well, you're going to be giving talks about what Krishnamurti talks about. And I said, who's Krishnamurti? And he said, oh, you don't know who Krishnamurti is? And he explained to me about this guy from India, goes and lives in England or whatever. Anyway, he said, yeah, you're going to be talking about, he said, he said, that's great, you'll be talking about it because he's passed away and someone needs to take his place. Or, well, he didn't say take his place. He said someone needs to be talking about, continue sharing that. So I said, oh, okay, well, it didn't mean anything to me. Anyway, he told me a number of things. Like one of the things he said was, oh, how's your father? And I said, oh, he's fine. He said, oh, well, I see he's going to get colon cancer. Yeah, and he's looking at my chart. He's not looking at my dad's, and sure enough, about 7 months later, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. And after I'm at the hospital with my brothers, and he's there, and he's had his diagnosis, the prognosis, and the doctor says that he needs to get things in order. He's going to need to get he's got maybe 2 weeks or a month, and I was upset. So I called. I went outside. I'm standing in the parking garage, and I called Stuart up on my cell phone and tell Stuart, and Stuart, I'm not supposed to tell his name. He asked me not to mention his name. But anyway, I called him up, and anyway, I told him what the prognosis was. Number one, that what he said was actually occurring, and then what the prognosis was. And so he says, "Oh, no, the doctors, I don't know what they're talking about. He's going to live another 10 years." And I said, "Oh, you?" I said, "Okay, that's great." And and sure enough, he did live another 10 years.
Amazing.
So.
I want to do a follow-up on this because I read up on your parents, prominent people in Boston back in the day. Your father, helped me with the pronunciation, Norio Kushi?
Yes.
Okay. He was internationally known for introducing macrobiotics to the United
Yes, that's
States
correct.
and many other things. He lectured the world over. Before, assuming they've passed on,
Yes,
how
that's
are they
correct.
engaging you with the newfound son they have named Norio, who's a totally different person by the time you made your transformation? How did they deal with
Yeah.
that?
Oh, well, my mother passed away in 2001, so
Okay.
she passed away prior to the Norio character seeing all of this. But my dad, he didn't seem particularly interested. Of course, I shared with him, the insights that I had gotten and all. So, but he didn't seem particularly interested, which is fine. It doesn't matter that whether people know it or not. They're still divine.
You raise a good.
And I just said, well, we all have everything we could ever want. There's nothing ever missing. The only thing that prevents us from recognizing that is who you think you are. The bad news is that everything you think you are, which is only an idea, dies with the body. It doesn't reincarnate or anything like that. So that's the bad news. The good news is that there is no death. I can assure everyone absolutely that they've never done a thing wrong in their life. And I think that's what forgiveness really is to see that you can never do anything wrong in your life. So what you're doing, what one is engaged in, is, in a sense, you can say it's perfect. So on one level, to say what should you do, what should someone do, the simple answer is, well, you're already doing it.
Just be patient.